I've got a business trip coming up for 2 nights and 3 days.
My husband, who works in sales, often has to travel to visit clients. Having worked in the same office, I know it's a tough job, filled with daily entertaining and heavy labor. That sounds tough. Take care, okay?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
I did everything I could to support him with his trip preparations. Then, before we knew it, the day of his departure arrived, and I sent him off with a smile. At that moment, I had no idea. I was unaware that this would be the last genuine smile I would offer him. My name is Mary. I'm currently 29 and a stay-at-home wife. I met my husband, James, at the company where I worked before we got married. I was in sales, but he transferred there, and as we made our rounds together, we became close. Initially, we kept our relationship a secret at work. He suggested we do so to avoid making our coworkers uncomfortable. I agreed, so we kept our relationship under wraps, sneaking around for dates. However, one Sunday changed everything, and our relationship suddenly became public knowledge at the company. A coworker from our department saw us walking hand in hand. From that day on, the rumors spread quickly, and by the following week, everyone in our department knew about us. But thanks to that whole episode, James and I became the golden couple of our department, eventually leading us to say our vows 5 years ago. Quitting my job to focus on our marriage now seems like a cherished memory. Nowadays, I catch myself reminiscing about those simpler times. Occasionally, I find myself longing for those carefree days because lately, the spark of being a young, in-love couple is notably absent between us. Our connection feels like it's been put on ice. And to pour salt on the wound, James has been practically living at the office with his endless late nights. The precious moments we used to share are becoming increasingly rare, almost as if they're slipping through our fingers. On a day that was far from the ordinary, driven by the promise of snagging some deals, I decided to venture out to a grocery store I rarely visit. As I was biking towards the store, my gaze unexpectedly fell upon James. He was heading in a direction that made no sense, completely opposite from the direction of our cozy home and his downtown office. What in the world is James doing here? I pondered with a mix of confusion and curiosity bubbling inside me. I pedaled faster, eager to catch up and call out to him. But I slammed on my brakes when I noticed he wasn't alone. By his side was a woman. A closer look brought a wave of recognition. It was Ashley, from the planning department right next to where James works. A flurry of thoughts raced through my mind. Could they be running an errand for work? I questioned myself, trying to rationalize the situation. But it was way past the time any typical office hours would have ended. And considering Ashley's role was strictly in planning, it seemed highly unlikely they needed to be out and about together for work-related reasons. So what's the deal here? He's been telling me night after night that he's buried in paperwork. But here he is, out with Ashley? I couldn't wrap my head around it. That notion felt like a punch to the gut, leaving me swamped with a flood of distressing thoughts and an unsettling feeling of unrest. The laughter and ease between them were painfully evident, even from afar. As I stood there, my thoughts spinning wildly, I couldn't help but observe them sneaking into a cafe, their movements careful, as if trying to avoid being seen. At that moment, my mind was a jumbled mess, teetering between denial and the stark reality of my husband's all too suspicious behavior. This wasn't how I planned my day. I had ventured out, intending to pick up some special ingredients to make a nice dinner, something out of the ordinary. Yet, here I was, my mind elsewhere, leading me to forget half of what I needed from the store. This oversight left me scrambling to put together a makeshift meal from the odds and ends left in our pantry, far from the culinary delight I had envisioned. By the time James walked through the door, I had managed to arrange a somewhat presentable dinner on our table. "Welcome back," I said, doing my best to inject a sense of normalcy into my voice, despite this storm of emotions brewing inside me.
"I'm home,"
he replied in the same routine manner, heading straight for the shower with his smartphone in tow. It struck me as odd. Why the need to have his phone with him in the shower? Suspicion, once it takes root, tends to cast a shadow over the most mundane of actions. Bracing myself, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room once he was done with his shower. "James, you were with Ashley from the planning department earlier today, right?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. His reaction was immediate and telling. He looked like a deer caught in headlights.
"Why would you ask that?"
He stammered, the usual calm in his demeanor replaced by a noticeable tension that only served to heighten my suspicions. I saw you when I was on my way to the supermarket. You know, they were having their big sale today, so I thought I'd take advantage and bike all the way there," I said, trying to keep my tone light and breezy, masking the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "So you weren't actually working late then?" I casually probed further, though every fiber of my being was anything but casual at that moment. James stumbled over his words before he managed to muster a response.
Well, there's this new project we're launching for the summer, and the sales pitch is starting next week. I was just going over some of the project details with her at a cafe near the office,"
he explained. While his explanation made sense on the surface, given the frequent collaborations between the sales and planning departments, it did little to quell the growing storm of doubt within me. But why choose a cafe for the meeting? I pressed on, seeking clarity amidst the fog of uncertainty.
"All the meeting rooms were already booked,"
he responded, a plausible scenario for a small company like ours. Yet something about it didn't sit right with me. But why meet at a cafe that's so far from the office? I persisted, my questions becoming sharper, more focused.
"That's beside the point. Why does that even matter?"
He snapped back, his frustration now clearly visible.
"Are you questioning my integrity?"
he challenged, turning the situation around on me. "No, I'm not questioning you, it's just that," I faltered, trying to navigate the delicate balance between my suspicions and the trust that had anchored our marriage.
"I'm not in the mood for dinner anymore,"
he declared, his words cutting through the tense air. He retreated to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my niece and a table set for two. I had never, in all our years together, seen my husband so utterly furious. The intensity of his anger was a clear sign to me, shining a spotlight on the deep rift I had inadvertently caused between us. It led me to question, perhaps for the first time seriously, whether our relationship was truly as transparent and free of doubt as we had comforted ourselves into believing. The thought that crossed my mind was simple yet profound. If he truly had nothing to hide, his frustration and discomfort under my barrage of questions were utterly justified. This moment of introspection was a turning point for me, a realization that maybe, just maybe, I had stepped over a boundary I shouldn't have. Moving forward, I consciously decided to approach my husband with more kindness, understanding, and patience than ever before, hoping to mend the fragile threads of our connection. This shift in my behavior seemed to have a positive impact as I gradually noticed a change in his routine. The late nights at the office became less frequent, and he started returning home earlier, a change that filled my heart with relief and hope. Internally, I breathed a sigh of relief, chastising myself for possibly overthinking the situation to begin with. Maybe I was just imagining things, I mused, trying to convince myself to let go of the lingering doubts that clung to the edges of my thoughts. Despite my attempts at reassurance, the truth was that my initial instincts weren't as unfounded as I had hoped. The nagging feeling that I should have acted on my suspicions earlier remained, a thought that haunted me with the possibility that things could have been different. The realization of this truth, however, was still a ways off.
"Next week, I've got a 3-day business trip planned,"
James announced one evening. "Is it for a client visit?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light.
"Yeah."
Client visits were a common part of his job in sales, often involving trips far from home. Having worked in a similar role before, I knew all too well how demanding these trips could be. "That sounds tough. Take care, okay?" I said, offering my support as best as I could.
"I will. Thanks,"
he replied, his voice carrying a mix of gratitude and resolve. I poured my efforts into supporting him as he prepared for the trip, determined to show my love and support. And then, before we knew it, the day of his departure arrived. I sent him off with a heartfelt smile, oblivious to the fact that it would be the last truly genuine smile I would share with him for some time. The day he was expected to return, I found myself eagerly preparing a special dinner for the two of us, something he hadn't done in far too long. As I found myself wondering about his return, I glanced at my phone, only to see a message notification from him that stopped me in my tracks.
"We had a great time on this trip. Can't wait to catch up at our favorite cafe tomorrow. Love you, Ashley."
Oh, my heart sank as I read the words, a mixture of disbelief and shock washing over me. In a cruel twist of fate, my husband had mistakenly sent me a message meant for someone else, revealing a truth I was unprepared to face. In an instant, without even a moment's hesitation, my fingers moved faster than my mind, capturing a screenshot of the message that had just illuminated my phone screen. It was a reflex, perhaps a way to hold on to something tangible that had just been unleashed. As I stood there, rooted to the spot in my kitchen, the message disappeared with a simple notification. Message deleted. But the truth, stark and undeniable, couldn't be erased so easily. Betrayal was written all over this situation, as clear as the noonday sun. What was supposed to be a routine business trip now seemed like nothing more than a cover for a clandestine affair. The shock of this revelation was so overwhelming that tears refused to come. Instead, there was a numbness, a void where my heart used to be. In the midst of this turmoil, my mind raced to piece together the fragments of reality. The cafe he mentioned. It must be the one near that supermarket we went to together last month, I thought, a pang of nostalgia hitting me as I remembered our innocent, mundane errands. Tomorrow, he plans to meet her there. Yes, that's their spot. That's when I'll confront this head-on. It was in that moment, with my resolve hardening like steel, that I made my decision. As fate would have it, the sound of the front door creaking open snapped me back to the present.
I'm home.
Echoed through the house, his voice carrying a lightness that felt like a slap in the face. Welcome back, I replied, my voice steady but my heart racing. His attempt to sound upbeat was painfully obvious. A thin veneer over the guilt I imagined must be eating at him. I quickly erased the worry from my face, replacing it with a smile so fake it made my cheeks hurt.
Traveling for work is so exhausting,
he remarked, trying to sound casual, but his eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. It was clear he was concerned, probably wondering if his mistake had been discovered. I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room, to cut through the pretense with a question that had been burning inside me. You sent a message earlier, didn't you? What was that about? I asked, my tone light but my gaze fixed on him, searching for any flicker of truth in his eyes. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flitting away as he scrambled for an explanation.
That was nothing. I thought I'd be late getting back, so I sent you a heads up. But then things changed, and I managed to make it back as planned, so I deleted the message.
He stammered, his words tumbling out in a rush. His response hung in the air between us, a flimsy bridge over a chasm of silence and secrets. Facing my husband, the impulse to confront him with the evidence of his betrayal surged within me, a tempest of anger begging to be unleashed. Yet, the realization that such an outburst would derail the careful strategy I had devised brought me back from the brink. It urged me to maintain a facade of calm. You look utterly worn out, I remarked, the words heavy with an unspoken tension that seemed to thicken the air between us. In such a charged atmosphere, the prospect of articulating the multitude of thoughts racing through my mind was daunting, to say the least. I suddenly don't feel well. I think I'll turn in early, I declared, fabricating a convenient excuse to extricate myself from the increasingly oppressive silence that enveloped us. Turning on my heel, I made to leave, only to hear him respond in a tone that was carelessly dismissive.
Take care then.
His casual indifference adding insult to injury. I countered with a smile that was all too bright, too forced, mirroring the clownish grin I imagined plastered on my face as I retreated into our bedroom. That night, sleep proved elusive. A relentless parade of conflicting emotions kept me in a state of restless vigil, torn between a desperate longing for the new day and a fervent wish for it to never dawn. I found myself adrift in a no-man's land. I was suspended between the celestial dance of the moon and the sun. As morning broke, it seemed as though the previous day's confrontations had dissipated into the ether. My husband adopted an air of unaffected normalcy as he left for work. The ease with which he seemed to compartmentalize and move beyond our troubles struck me with a pang of envy, a bitter reminder of the emotional turmoil that continued to churn within me. With a heavy heart and mind, I set out for the cafe, determined to see through the plan I had painstakingly prepared. Donning a disguise and armed with a voice recorder, I was a woman on a mission. Shortly after the arranged time, they arrived, my husband and Ashley, their easy camaraderie a stark juxtaposition to the role I had been forced into. With a discreet press of a button, I began recording, my pulse racing with anticipation and dread. Their conversation unfolded, a casual exchange that belied the depth of their deceit.
Finding time for these clandestine meetings has been challenging, making our moments together all the more precious.
They mused, their words a knife to my heart.
I've had to exercise caution, ensuring not to arouse any suspicion. The lie of working overtime is growing thin. It's a ticking time bomb until she uncovers the truth.
My husband's admission was a cold splash of reality, confirming my darkest suspicions. As I grappled with the magnitude of his betrayal, Ashley praised his ingenuity.
Concocting a fictitious trip was a stroke of genius.
Indeed, the frequent business trips of the sales department made for the perfect alibi. She was none the wiser,
He boasted, reveling in their deceit. The revelation that even the business trip was a fabrication was a devastating blow, a testament to the lengths he would go to conceal his infidelity. In a moment of chilling nonchalance, he added,
In fact, I accidentally sent her a message meant for you, expressing how much I enjoyed our trip and my love for you.
Wow, were you okay?
She asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern.
Luckily, I caught it immediately and deleted the message. Had a bit of a scare, but thankfully it seems you didn't notice a thing. I must say, I'm grateful for an oblivious partner.
He laughed it off, sharing a moment of mirth with her, oblivious to the tempest of rage and betrayal churning in my heart. As their laughter tapered off, she, with a voice dripping with allure, suggested,
Tonight's the perfect excuse to say you're working late, don't you think? After a business trip, saying you're swamped with work sounds plausible.
That's a plan. Let's do it.
They nodded to each other, their exchange loaded with an unspoken agreement, and quickly left a restaurant. I followed them, driven by a need for closure, only to watch them blend into the anonymity of the hotel district. That was the last straw for me. Capturing a photo of them, arms entwined, standing in front of a hotel was the final piece of evidence I needed. I couldn't hold back any longer and called out, James, where do you think you're going? They turned, their faces draining of color as they registered my presence.
Why are you here?
Ignoring my husband's stunned question, I fixed him with a stare that I hoped conveyed the depth of my betrayal and hurt. I waited for him to squirm under the weight of his guilt. I simply stared, letting the silence stretch between us, forcing him to fill it with an explanation.
We're here for a meeting.
He finally said, the excuse so flimsy it would have been laughable under different circumstances. Ashley, for her part, seemed slightly more composed but was visibly sweating under the weight of their fabricated story. The absurdity of their explanation made me laugh, a bitter sound that held no real humor. A meeting here. What kind of project could possibly require this setting? I challenged, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Eventually, my husband, finally grasping the severity of the situation, knelt down in a desperate plea for forgiveness.
I'm sorry.
Ashley, mimicking his actions, bowed her head in a dramatic display of contrition. But there, on the pavement in front of a hotel, with her alongside him, did he really think forgiveness was an option? It was then I revealed the divorce papers I had prepared, pulling them from my bag with a sense of finality that marked the end of our shared path. Here's everything I needed from you, so go ahead and enjoy whatever's left of your evening. By the way, that text you accidentally sent me yesterday? It turned out to be the golden ticket I needed to catch you red-handed today. I began, my voice steady but laced with a hint of victory. We'll get into the nitty-gritty with my lawyer later on. Just a heads up, his response was dripping with accusation. So, you knew all this time? Playing dumb and then turning the tables on me, huh? You're quite the schemer. The audacity of his words struck a nerve, but I stood my ground, firing back. And who's the one betraying our vows, laughing behind my back as if loyalty meant nothing? Seems to me you're the real villain in this drama. With a mix of anger and pride swelling within me, I couldn't help but add, oh, did you think I was just some naive wife, oblivious to your escapades? Thank you for that enlightening misdirected message. It's been quite revealing seeing the extent of my husband's foolishness. His face dropped.
You were at the cafe today. You heard everything.
The realization finally dawned on him, but by then, I had nothing left to say. Leaving them sitting there, dumbfounded and defeated, I walked away with my head held high, the cool evening air feeling like the breath of freedom. Reflecting on that moment, the sight of them, desolate and abandoned in front of the hotel, seemed almost pathetic. I briefly entertained the thought of capturing that image, a permanent reminder of their downfall, but regret soon washed over me for not doing so. The divorce proceedings, facilitated by my attorney, were straightforward, thanks in no small part to the compelling evidence I had collected. The misdirected message, the incriminating conversation overheard at the cafe, and the unequivocal photo taken outside the hotel painted a clear picture of betrayal. I demanded and successfully received $30,000 in damages from my ex-husband, and another $15,000 from the woman who thought she could stealthily disrupt our lives. However, merely receiving compensation felt insufficient for the deceit and emotional turmoil they put me through. I took it upon myself to ensure their transgressions were known, sharing the ordeal with mutual contacts at my ex-husband's workplace. The fallout was immediate and intense, as expected. The news of our relationship spread like wildfire at his workplace, making the environment there untenable for both of them. In an unexpected turn, my ex-husband's parents reached out to apologize for their son's behavior. They disclosed how he had squandered his savings on the settlement and sought their financial assistance, only to be firmly denied any further support, a consequence of his actions they deemed fitting. Left with no savings and a tarnished reputation, my ex-husband found himself adrift, resorting to a string of part-time jobs to make ends meet. The local job center became a frequent haunt for him as he struggled to find stable employment in the aftermath of his decisions. Meanwhile, I embarked on a new chapter of my life. Moving out of the house that once harbored our shared dreams, I settled into a modern apartment funded by the restitution paid. This fresh start was complemented by securing a new job, where I've begun to weave the fabric of a new beginning, surrounded by supportive colleagues and a vibrant community. Embarking on a new chapter in my life with a fresh start in a charming apartment and a job that promised to be both challenging and fulfilling was exhilarating. The transition to independence was sweetened by the presence of my neighbor, a comforting figure amidst the unfamiliarity of my new surroundings.
Good evening. It's nice to see you again. I hope your day at work wasn't too taxing, he said with a friendly nod, his voice carrying a warmth that made the end of a long day feel a bit lighter.
Good evening to you too, I replied, appreciating the kindness in his greeting. It was a small exchange, but in a new city, even small kindnesses felt significant.
Are you getting ready for dinner?
He inquired. His casual interest felt genuine and neighborly. Yes, I am, I confirmed, already wondering what I would make with the limited groceries I had. He hesitated for a moment before offering.
Would you like to join me for dinner at my place? It's just eating alone feels a bit melancholy, and I thought it might be nice to share a meal.
His invitation touched a chord. I totally get that. It just get lonely. I'd be delighted to join you if you're sure. It's very kind of you to offer, I accepted, feeling a sense of community and connection that had been missing since my move.
Absolutely, please come in.
He insisted, stepping aside to welcome me into his home. His hospitality felt like a warm embrace, a reminder that kindness and new friendships could be found even in the most unexpected places. As I crossed the threshold into his home, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement for what the future held. This dinner marked the end of solitary evenings and the beginning of a new friendship. In that moment, I realized that moving forward didn't mean leaving everything behind, but rather making space for new experiences and connections.